very soon.
I'm Kristen Dodd, live at Pensacola Beach, where the waves are really beginning to kick up. I'll have a live report coming up in a few moments.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Weather Center. I'm Lisa Moser. We'll monitor the movement of Hurricane George, and we're also tracking some severe weather in the upper Midwest today here at the Weather Channel along the Great Lake region. We are concerned. More on that in just a moment. But first, the update on George. After slamming most of the western part of Florida Keys yesterday, the hurricane is now on a collision course with some coastal areas in the Gulf of Mexico. And again, the big questions today are when and where will it again make landfall? And Jeanette Jones and Dr. Steve Lyons will try to answer some of those questions as we turn to them in the forecast center. Jeanette?
All right, thanks so much, Lisa. Once again, we are watching Hurricane George, and now we do have hurricane warnings in effect along the Gulf Coast. Want to show you the latest satellite vantage point. You can see that the hurricane is still very well defined, still gaining a little bit of strength as it moves on through the Gulf of Mexico. It's not moving that quickly either. Want to introduce you to our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. Steve, we are watching this very closely. We think it will intensify and will probably make landfall somewhere in the Gulf Coast.
That is correct, Jeanette. Right now it's been entraining some dry air on the westward side that's keeping it sort of in check right now, and the eye has been coming and going, sort of blinking or winking at us a little bit. But once that integrates this high pressure up here, which is sort of a sinking high with this rising high over the top of it, it's going to take off into probably a Category 3 before landfall, which is a major hurricane.
Yeah, and that's not exactly what we want to see. Let's go over the latest information. This is as of 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time. Coordinates are now 26.1 north, 85.6 west. That centers at about 385 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. Winds are at 105. Still a Category 2 hurricane, but as Steve mentioned, that could change. It's moving west-northwest at 12 miles per hour. So let's go over the hurricane warnings that have now been issued from around St. Mark's and Panama City. I should say St. Mark's to Panama City is still a hurricane watch, but from Panama City beyond that to Morgan City, Louisiana, these are the new hurricane warnings that are in effect. Now, where you see the lighter orange with the hurricane watches, we also have tropical storm warnings in effect for you there. So I want to go over those for you from St. Mark's to Panama City, Florida, tropical storm warnings in effect. Now, as we look at the visible satellite vantage point, you can really see that that eye is becoming a little more visible.
Yes, you can, and now it's undergoing a much more rapid intensification phase here, at least based on visible satellite imagery, Jeanette. You can see these big, deep thunderstorms starting to pop out on all sides. Keep in mind, of course, that most of the very strong winds are on the east and northeast side over here.
All right, and we're going to have to watch that very, very closely. We have a crew standing by in Panama, not Panama City, I think it's Pensacola Beach, Florida. Kristen Dodd is there on the beach. Kristen, can you tell us what conditions are like right now?
Well, Jeanette, throughout the morning we have seen our conditions go downhill a bit and a lot of changes taking place across the beaches. First in the form of some of the outer clouds beginning to wrap around Hurricane George. Those have continued to move over the beaches periodically. Still no rain, but the wind is beginning to pick up somewhat. Also picking up is the surf. Since our first morning live report at about 5 this morning, the surf has increased dramatically, and it's also beginning to break much farther out. Earlier, we did have a lot of the surfers in the water taking advantage of the waves, but they've been telling me now that it is simply too rough, and they have headed back to the beaches. Also on the beaches here, because of all of the surf, we have been seeing a lot of debris blown up and washed in, a lot of the seaweed, and also jellyfishes now beginning to come on shore. Also, here at the beaches, a lot of folks who are taking in the view, and this is a little bit scary because, as you just mentioned, we are under a hurricane warning. We have evacuation orders out for all the barrier islands, yet with the plenty of sunshine that is still in place here, folks are trying to grab him one more morning of sunshine here at the beach. We need to be evacuating these barrier islands. The routes during Hurricane Opal in '95 became extremely congested. The emergency management folks have issued the evacuation orders well ahead of Hurricane George to try to get the people off the beaches. At this point, those evacuations are a little bit slow, and I hope that we do avoid the congestion of what we had in Opal. We don't want to see a repeat of that.
Thanks so much, Kristen Dodd, reporting live from Pensacola Beach, Florida. We'll be checking back with you in about half an hour. Once again, I'm joined by our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. Well, yesterday was a rough day for a lot of folks in the Keys, but as we look at the radar, things are improving.
That's right. The only people left in the that are getting any bad weather, the dry tortugas out here, still getting some winds, gusting to tropical storm force and some light rain, but they're going to clear out and improve here this afternoon.
We may still see some feeder bands, though, moving through Florida, giving us some strong thunderstorms?
That's right. We could still get some bands similar to this one move off the coast of Fort Myers or Tampa Bay.
All right, so we'll have to watch for that. Now, as we look at this satellite vantage point, I want you to address the projected path, because everyone wants to know, where is this thing going?
Okay, our best estimate right now, and it's actually a worst-case scenario as well, and I'll tell you why in just a second, is right in through here. The worst-case scenario is because that puts New Orleans in the right front quadrant where the southeasterly winds blow right into the bay there and fill up the water with a storm surge. And also, this sector of the hurricane is the strongest sector.
Okay, so as we look at that projected path, what kind of time frame are we talking about?
Well, now this one, it needs to be updated, but we're still looking roughly at the same time frame, and that is sometime on Sunday or early Monday. What we expect is it comes up here, it slows down and just ever so slowly bothers the heck out of us, and hopefully it'll slow down over water and not over land. If it landfalls and slows down, then not only do we have a storm surge problem, but we also have a major rain problem on top of it.
Let's talk about the storm surge potential in New Orleans. As you mentioned, this would be the worst case scenario.
That's right. These are worst case scenarios for each of these categories. Right now we're at a category 2, so that the maximum water level rise you probably see is 15 feet. If it goes to 3 as forecast, the maximum level would be 20 in some location, not everywhere. And of course you see it goes up rather dramatically. But as you go to the east, it gets better. So for example, in Gulfport, Biloxi, the maximum for a category 3 at landfall would only be about 10 or 12 feet, and for Pensacola it would only be 5 feet. But on the other hand, there are no waves in this area, and there are big waves in the Pensacola area, and we'll see those big waves come into the beach. By the time Kristen leaves the beach this evening, the waves will be breaking at least 15 to 20 feet.
Okay, so the best advice is get on out of there.
Stay out of the water.
All right, thanks so much, Dr. Steve Lyons. As always, if you have other questions about what is happening with the hurricane and the projected path, you can tap into the Weather Channel's online service at weather.com if you're away from your television set. Now we go back to the studio, and here's Lisa.
Thanks, Jeanette. Jeanette Jones will be in the forecast center for much of this afternoon for more updates. Parts of the West End are dealing with some cloudy skies and some rain showers. We're looking out for the possibility of some thunderstorms here too. The southeast sunny and warm, and we're enjoying some sunshine today in the northeast. While in the upper Midwest, however, we do have some turbulent weather to tell you about.
Residents in the Florida Panhandle and other areas along the Gulf are now boarding up and preparing for a possible visit from Hurricane George. Good afternoon and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Jill Brown. As we monitor the movement of Hurricane George, we're also tracking the possibility of severe weather today in the upper Midwest and the northern Great Lakes. More on that in a moment. First, an update on George. After slamming most of the western part of the Florida Keys yesterday, the hurricane is now on a collision course with some coastal areas in the Gulf of Mexico. And again, the big questions are when and where will it make landfall? Jeanette Jones and Dr. Steve Lyons have details in the forecast center.
Thanks so much, Jill. Those are very big questions, and we're going to try and answer them as best we can right now. I'm joined by our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. It has shown a little bit of strengthening. We think we may see more intensification, though, right?
That's right. The environment is favorable for just a very slow but steady intensification. At least that's all we hope for. We don't hope for anything more than that. As a matter of fact, we hope it weakens, but we don't expect anything more than maybe a Category 3 at landfall, but that's still pretty bad compared to what it is right now.
Yeah, certainly. Let's take a look at the latest information on Hurricane George. As of 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time, 26.1 north, 85.6 west. Those are the coordinates in case you're plotting along with us. That centers at about 385 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. The winds are still at 105 miles per hour, which categorizes it as a 2 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. It's moving west-northwest at 12 miles per hour, and the pressure is 974 millibars. Now, I want to go over these hurricane watches and warnings that we do have in effect, now having been put into hurricane warnings from Panama City all the way through Pensacola, Mobile, New Orleans, Morgan City. So where you once had hurricane watches, you now have hurricane warnings in effect. And a hurricane warning does mean that hurricane conditions are expected in the warned area within 24 hours. So preparations to protect life and property should be rushed to completion. We also have hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings in effect from Panama City to St. Marks, Florida, and a hurricane watch in effect as you head on into Intracoastal City and back towards Morgan City. So that is the deal with the hurricane watches and warnings. The biggest news being that we have the hurricane warnings now in effect along the Gulf Coast. So folks should be preparing and getting out of the picture.
That's right, and they should be expecting hurricane force winds within the next 24 hours. That's what that means.
All right, as we look at the visible satellite picture, we like to show you this one because it shows the eye very clearly.
That's right, the eye is becoming a little better defined, and when I say better here, I mean well defined, not better from the standpoint of anybody on the coast. And also the eye wall around here with the deep thunderstorm activity continues to grow, so it's, at least from a satellite perspective, it's looking better. Luckily, the aircraft reconnaissance, at least the last we measured, still has the pressure about the same. But if this signature on satellite continues, I would imagine they would find lower pressures here in another 3 hours or so.
And again, if we do find a lower pressure, that would mean intensification.
Absolutely. Lower pressure means intensification, and they could go to Category 3 because it's not that far away now.
If we see a Category 3 hurricane, that would mean winds would be over 110 miles an hour, and it would be a major hurricane.
That's right. 111 to 120. Miles per hour is the Category 3 range.
And certainly this hurricane has been even stronger than that.
Oh, it has, and we've actually had wind gusts to 113 miles per hour on the ground in the Keys. But gusts don't count. When we talk about the category, we're talking about a 1-minute sustained wind and not a gust. So we provide gust information for you, but it's really the sustained wind that they're forecasting.
What about the upper airflow pattern? What is it telling us?
Well, we've had an upper level low off to the west of the circulation, and we've had very dry air up here associated with a high pressure that's sinking. Sinking air here, rising air here, and it's moving into the sinking air, and it's eroded away a lot of the thunderstorm activity on the northwest side. That's why you see the low clouds spiraling around here into the center here without any deep thunderstorms, which is good news. We want anything we can to get rid of this system, but it's not going to be enough in this case.
All right, looking at the radar, things are looking much better for South Florida and the Keys, as I'm sure cleanup efforts are definitely underway at this point. We're still getting some rain on some sections of the west coast of Florida.
That's right, and most of this is really very light rain or really high cloud evaporating before it hits the ground, other than some of the stuff off the coast, which still could be a significant marine hazard with thunderstorms embedded in it. So be very careful. If you venture out, I don't recommend it. Stay in port.
All right, very good advice. Now I want to talk about the big question: where is it going and when is it going to hit?
Well, the forecast continues to take it to the northwest. We think it's going in the general direction of New Orleans, but keep in mind at the 36 to 48 hour time frame we have a significant spread in the air there, so it could be here, it could be there. The other thing too is we have hurricane force winds that are not a single point but are spread over a large area, so this whole warning area could expect hurricane force winds in it. But right now it looks like the greater New Orleans area would be the hardest hit, but that could change if it happens to move a little bit north. Now then the western panhandle would be, the Florida panhandle would be more under the gun. Right now that is not the case, but we'll keep you informed as things change.
Is it possible that it could slow up as it gets closer to land?
Good point. Right now it's moving at about off and on between 10 and 14 miles per hour. It's expected to slow down as it gets toward the coast. So if you've been calculating or projecting when the landfall was based on the current time frame, you're getting a landfall before the actual official forecast landfall, and that's because it's forecast to slow down near the coast. And it's supposed to be somewhere right offshore sometime Sunday night. Monday morning it's still right over the greater New Orleans area or generally along the coast, and Tuesday morning it's still here. So what this means is it could be a major rain threat as well. The worst possible scenario that I could imagine would be a landfall right like this, where we have the wind coming in right into the greater New Orleans area as a major hurricane and slowing up and stopping, because then you have the water piling up in there, sits there, and then you get the major rain on top of it. That would be a worst case scenario. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just saying that that would be a worst case. If it landfalls farther to the east, the storm surge will definitely be lower, but the wave heights will be higher. And we already see that waves are going to be at least 20 feet along the Florida Panhandle later this evening.
And talking about the storm surge, that's one of the biggest threats, and for New Orleans it would be just devastating.
Yeah, this is sort of a worst case water level height at some location in the greater New Orleans area for each category of hurricane. So in the 6 to 10 foot range for a 1. Right now we're at the top end of the 2, so it would be the 10 to the 15 foot range, not over the entire greater New Orleans area, but about that range. And if we go to 3, then it would be more like into the 15 to 20 foot range, and that's a water level rise above whatever the astronomical tide is at the time. So that's a very, very high water level rise, and people usually lose their lives in water associated with hurricanes, either flooding or from storm surge, and we do not want that to happen.
No, we don't. Very good.
We're going to lay fish. If it gets in the Gulf and looks like it's heading this direction, I'm gone.
That man certainly has the right idea for people in the path of Hurricane George. Anyone at risk should take plans and make plans to get out of the way. George still churns in the Gulf of Mexico. It's making for a high wind and dangerously high surf on Florida's Panhandle. Despite that, some people in the danger zone are not heeding the warning. Florida's Pensacola Beach is still drawing a crowd of spectators. Hello and welcome to this edition of Weather Center. I'm Lisa Moser. As you saw, the Panhandle is taking a pounding as George approaches. Elsewhere in the country, we have some real heat to deal with in the southern plains. A chance of some severe thunderstorms across the Midwest at this hour. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but for now, let's turn to Jeanette Jones. She is in the forecast center and has more on Hurricane George.
Well, Hurricane George leaves behind a path of destruction in the Caribbean. It has already claimed the lives of over 300 people. Yesterday, it pounded the Keys as it brought the ocean onto city streets, downed trees and power lines, and destroyed a number of houseboats and floating homes, wasting away the land known as Margaritaville. Winds of more than 100 miles per hour ripped through the area. Now the storm threatens to slam into the Mississippi Delta area at some point. I'm joined now by our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons, and we are looking at some intensification perhaps?
Well, it looks on satellite like it's intensifying. We're going to get reconnaissance information from it shortly here. We're waiting anxiously to see if the pressure's fallen. But looking at the satellite imagery, you can see the circulation center, the eye, is getting a little bit better organized. And one telltale sign here is notice this high cloud. It's starting to come out away from the eye, coming back over the low cloud. That's an indication that it's taking back its territory away from that sinking air to the northwest, which is a bad sign.
Yeah, intensification probably likely. Let's check out the latest information on Hurricane George. We are awaiting some new information as of the 1 p.m. advisory Central Time. But as of 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time, the coordinates were 26.1 north, 85.6 west. And that centers at 385 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. Winds at 105 miles per hour, which categorizes it as a 2 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, a 3 being a major hurricane. It's moving west-northwest at 12 miles per hour, and the pressure 974 millibars. We'll see if that changes at all. Here's a look at some hurricane watches and warnings. I believe we have another vantage point that's a little closer up to give you a better perspective. These hurricane warnings have been put into effect as of this morning, and it's the same location that did have hurricane watches in effect. So now we're talking about hurricane warnings, which means that hurricane conditions are expected in this warned area within 24 hours. So preparation to protect life and property should be rushed to completion, and we just want to give you a heads up there. We also have tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches in effect from Panama City to St. Marks, Florida, and we also have hurricane watches in effect from Intracoastal City to Morgan City in Louisiana. As we check out yet another satellite vantage point. This is the visible satellite picture, and we're going to be telling you about how things have evolved. Steve, I believe we have some new information here.
That's right. Here's the 1 p.m. advisory we've got. Let's see here. I'm trying to absorb this. Here's the new position.
26.3 north, and the longitude would be 85.9 west, or about 360 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. We're told that the maximum sustained winds are near 105 miles per hour, so no change there. And it's moving west-northwest near 12 miles per hour, so not a lot of change as far as that is concerned. Looks like the hurricane warnings are the same, and the tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches are the same as well. The pressure still at 974 millibars.
That's right. So not too much change there, which is good news that it hasn't intensified, at least as of 1. But we'll wait till the 5 p.m. advisory and see what happens there.
All right, looking at this visible satellite picture, we can clearly see the eye, and as you were saying, it looks as if it's getting a little more organized.
And the deep thunderstorm activity, or convection as we call it, around the circulation is becoming better organized and deeper, or stronger, and that's not a good sign. Keep in mind that most of the real strong winds are off over in this sector of the hurricane, basically to the eye and to the left. Sorry, I'm looking the other way. To the eye and to the right, if you're looking in the direction of motion, which is this way. So that doesn't mean that there are not some strong winds over here, but most of the strongest winds are here, driving some very high surf that's going to come up to the coast here very shortly. Some of it's already there, but it's going to get much larger here in another 6 hours.
And speaking of that particular area and the surf getting up, I believe we have some pictures out of Pensacola, Florida, of folks trying to get their act together and get ready. We showed you people milling around Pensacola Beach, but not everyone in the area is taking the storm lightly. As the call for evacuations go out, many residents are actually boarding up their homes, which is excellent advice to a lot of folks. Looking at the radar, we don't have a lot of rain in the Florida Panhandle as of right now, which is good. They can get their things together and get on out of the way.
That's right. Right now the weather is fairly nice, a nice breeze out of the east, southeast, no rain at all. That should persist another 3 to 6 hours, and then the wind's going to start to come up.
And as the cleanup efforts continue in South Florida and the Keys, we're not getting a whole lot of rain. We may see some bands of showers and thunder showers throughout the day, so you'll need to keep an eye to the sky as far as that is concerned. Want to talk about the path and when we think this is going to hit.
Okay, here's our projected path. Now keep in mind, this swath is fairly consistent with a hurricane warning area, and what that means is you can experience hurricane force winds. That does not mean that the track will move over you to get the hurricane force winds. The best guesstimate is right in the middle of this, right through the New Orleans area, more or less, and we can pinpoint that more closely once we get closer to landfall. But it's also possible that it could come a little more north here into the Mobile area, the Biloxi area as well. So you should be always preparing for the worst.
Now it is moving at 12 miles per hour right now, but that could change. It could slow down.
That's right. You can see these lines here. This is the first batch. These are equal time intervals here, and you can see the distance changes. So that means it slows down as it approaches the coast, which is a real nuisance, because not only do the bad conditions persist and last longer, but you get a lot more rain.
Prolongs the agony, so to speak. All right, we will be watching throughout the weekend and taking in all of this new information and passing it along to you, especially if we see more intensification, because that will mean more destruction, perhaps.
That's right, and the storm surge information will be modified.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Steve Lyons. As always, if you're away from your television set throughout the weekend and you're near a computer, we're right there on the internet at weather.com. Now back to the studio, and here's Lisa.
Thank you. Janetta Jones will have another update in about 20 minutes. We are looking at some trouble weather for the upper Midwest at this time, and this edition of Weather Center is brought to you by GMC Truck. We are looking out towards the Green Bay area, all the way over to Alpena. If you're doing some traveling in this area, we have a mechanism.
Time now for a look at the tropics, and of course we've been updating you on Hurricane George, but that is not the only hurricane we have to tell you about. We actually have 4 hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin here. This is the first time since 1893 that we've had 4 hurricanes on the map at one time. George there over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. You see Karl, Ivan, and Jeanne, and we'll tell you about each and every one of them. Satellite picture in motion gives you a real good indication that George is the only one that's expected to affect any landmass at this point. Karl, Ivan, and Jeanne here all just about smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and all starting to get swept up to the northeast, and all should be beginning to diminish, and at least one of those will be extratropical, we think, within 24 hours. So we will no longer have 4 hurricanes on the map before you know it. Hurricane George, well, it's been on a long path across the Atlantic, came over Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Cuba, the Keys yesterday morning, and now it looks like it's about to make its last landfall, and that would be somewhere along the northern Gulf of Mexico coastline. So winds are 105 miles per hour. This is a serious threat to folks along the immediate coast, and evacuations are already in progress. Winds may pick up somewhat. This is a Category 2 hurricane, and it is possible that it will be a Category 3 before it makes landfall. So some strengthening is expected. West-northwest is the movement at 12 miles per hour. It is expected in the next 24 hours to make more of a turn to the northwest as opposed to west-northwest. Pressure 975 millibars. There's the satellite picture. You can see a well-defined eye now over warm Gulf of Mexico waters, with nothing keeping it from developing into a stronger hurricane. In Florida, we're still getting wind whipped, maybe a little bit. Certainly still some rain and thunderstorms around. In Sarasota, if you're ready to head back maybe to the Gulf Coast, if you went away to get away from the hurricane, still some rain today, but that's the worst of it. And tomorrow, actually, most of the peninsula should be in pretty good shape. The other good thing to note is that while yesterday we had a lot of reports of tornadoes, that's not the case in these thunderstorms today. I haven't seen any severe thunderstorm warnings at all. So Florida, some rain and thunderstorms, but things are getting better in the peninsula. In the Panhandle, preparations are underway. It looks like you are in a slightly better position today as the forecast track takes it more over toward Mississippi and Louisiana. Now, folks in this area obviously preparing, and the hurricane watches and warnings are in effect, and if they are adjusted at all, we'll let you know. And as we get updates on the intensity and the track of this hurricane, we'll pass them right on to you as well. Frequent updates at top and bottom of every hour coming your way. Hurricane Karl, well, this one's less of a threat. It's heading to the east. 85-mile-per-hour winds right now. It's actually one of our stronger hurricanes. It's moving northeast at 15 miles per hour, and again over open waters. We also have Hurricane Ivan. Now, this one should become extratropical in the next 24 hours. As it's heading over cooler waters, it's already beginning to weaken pretty quickly, and it has winds of 85 miles per hour, moving east at 35. And then we have Hurricane Jeanne. At one time was a pretty strong hurricane. Winds yesterday were 105 miles per hour. Now they're down to 75 miles per hour, so a minimal hurricane moving north-northwest at 12 miles per hour. Also expected to start heading to the north and eventually off to the northeast. So our 3 hurricanes away from George, none of them expected to affect land. They all should just sort of die out over cooler waters. As a matter of fact, there's your satellite picture of Jeanne. We're going to have to switch this one as it exits off stage left. So that covers the tropics. Things are busy, obviously. Most important, Hurricane George, and we'll keep you up to date on that, as we mentioned. Most of the South today, where preparations are underway, nice and quiet. And that's really true across much of the country. East Coast quiet, West Coast, a few more clouds and a few showers around. But this is the hot spot right along our front here. We do have a tornado watch that's in effect for northern lower Michigan. The possibility of thunderstorms that could produce tornadoes. Haven't seen tornado warnings, but we have had a lot of severe thunderstorm warnings. Let me show you the latest radar here into Michigan, and as this goes into motion, you'll see one batch of thunderstorms moving out. Here comes the next one. Emmett County, you do have a severe thunderstorm warning. These are fast-moving thunderstorms. They've been heading east at 50, sometimes even 60 miles per hour. And typically when you see thunderstorms moving that fast, you know what you're going to have would be strong winds. We've had some reports of tree damage, property damage due to winds today gusting to 80 miles per hour with these thunderstorms. So we'll keep an eye on these, and we'll keep you up to date on the threat of severe weather. We may also be talking about record heat, and of course we'll be talking more about Hurricane George. Stay tuned for Weather Center, and we'll do all of that next.
Folks in the Gulf Coast are preparing for Hurricane George, a storm that's already taken its toll on the Florida Keys and the Caribbean. Live updates just